I'm Dr. Aurelia Depau, Vice President of Clinical Programs and Medical Affairs at Tetra Bio-Pharma. In the next few slides, I present what it takes to conduct a clinical trial in compliance with the good clinical practices and the requirements of the regulatory authorities, and I have a word on the cost of a clinical trial. So in a clinical trial, there are three major steps: study startup, study conduct, and study closure. For each one of these steps, there are key clinical activities that have to be achieved, performed to move to the next step. So let's start with a study startup. See a study startup like a puzzle made of multiple pieces. There are major key pieces of this puzzle. The first one is the regulatory approval. Intuitively, we know that we need the approval of Health Canada or the FDA on the study-specific protocol, on the informed consent form, but also on the GMP grade study drug. Once you have the approval of your authorities, you need the approval of the ethics committee. And once you have the approval of the authorities and the ethics committee, because Tetra is working with control substance, we have to request from each clinical site we're working with to get a Schedule I license from the Drug Enforcement Administration or a research license from the Cannabis Act in Canada. Altogether, these three approvals takes a few months to be granted. Unfortunately, in parallel, you can work on other key pieces of the puzzle. One of them is vendor qualifications. So the last update on good clinical practices emphasized the way to qualify a vendor in clinical trials. We at Tetra, we audit all the critical clinical vendors. There are multiple vendors in a clinical trial. The most important are the ones who have the expertise to conduct the study, such as the statistical team, pharmacovigilance, the data management team, but you also need a central lab who will perform all the biochemistry analysis to follow up the safety of your patients. You also need to think about services such as the mailing. When you ship the medication from your distributor to the clinical site, you have to monitor the humidity and the temperature during the whole process. There are other key pieces in the puzzle. Study documentation is a major piece of the puzzle. It takes a lot of documentations before starting a trial. Why? Because you have to anticipate all the challenges in a trial. You need to have the response to all the anticipated challenges. You also need to monitor your trials. So you have a monitoring plan, but you also have a data management plan, you have a statistical analysis plan, etc., etc. You also have all the documentations you provide the patients to take the medications. You have the dosing instruction. You may have an e-learning, or for example, at Tetra for COMS and quick sleeve, we inhale the drug. We're using the Mighty Medic to inhale the drug. So the patient is instructed how to inhale the drug and how to clean the device. You also have the patient diary for the patients. The database, you have to set it up, you have to host it, you have to validate, test it, and maintain it. You need an expertise on that. You need also to forecast your enrollment, and based on your enrollment rate, then you'll calculate the total amount of study drug you need for the entirety of the trial. So all these steps have to be documented before starting the trial. And then you have the qualification of the sites. You have to be sure that the sites you collaborate with have the expertise, the resources, the equipment to meet your expectations, to meet the quality of your trial. So when all the pieces of the puzzle are in place, then you can conduct your trial. First of all, you start by the initiation. Initiation means training the site, the clinical staff. You train the site on the study-specific procedure. You remind the staff on the good clinical practices. You also remind them on what is considered fraud and misconduct, and you train them how to capture the data, how to report a side effect. To maintain the quality of your trial, you have to monitor the sites on a regular basis, on site, but also remotely. You have to be sure that the data are properly and accurately captured in the database, and the patient safety and well-being is properly handled as per good clinical practices. This is monitoring. Pharmacovigilance. This is of most important during the whole trials. Pharmacovigilance means safety and well-being of patients. So how a side effect is reported, when a side effect is reported by patients, the physician has to assess the severity, the seriousness, and any medications that the patients will need to take to stabilize or resolve the side effects. All of this has to be documented. We have a pharmacovigilance team that will issue safety report that will be reviewed by Tetra internally by a medical monitor and a clinical team to verify and to keep an oversight on the patient safety during the whole trial. And then obviously you have to, all the project management of this big project, you have to keep an oversight on all the clinical activities, not only at site, but also on all the clinical activities performed by your vendors. And you have to keep track, the clinical team at Tetra keep track of the enrollment rate and be sure that it's consistent with what you plan at the beginning of the trial. So when your last patient has performed her last visit on site, then you can initiate the site closure. This means that you monitor that all data has been properly and accurately entered in the database, that everything, there is no queries unresolved, that all side effects are stabilized or resolved. And then when everything is properly documented, everything is in place, then you can close the site. And the site has to keep all the source document archived for 25 years. When you can do that, when you have done that for all of your sites, then you can initiate the last database cleanliness and logout. When you have logged your database, then you can extract the data and start analyze your data. It can take 1 to 2 months to analyze the data because you have thousands of data and you don't analyze the data as you want. You have to follow your statistical analysis plan, which was approved way before study closure. The reason is to avoid any bias. Okay. Now, when you have your data analyzed, then you can prepare your clinical study report, which summarizes every event which happens during the trial, including your data. When you have your clinical study reports on hand, then you're in the final step of the study closure. This means that at Tetra, we verify that we have the documentation on all the trial at Tetra in the trial master file, organized properly in the trial master file, and then we archive this documentation for 25 years in a secure location. At this step, the study is closed. So I hope that now you understand that a clinical trial is a big project. It includes multiple stakeholders, multiple expertise, and it comes with a cost. Obviously, you have to pay for this expertise, but you also pay for the length of the trial. Let's say, for example, a trial with 10 sites, and the duration is 2 years, then you can expect to have 2 million Canadian dollars for the clinical site cost only. Why? Because each procedure comes with a cost. Let's see data management. Data management, as I said, is setting up the database, validate it, maintain it, be sure that all queries are resolved on time. All of this, it comes with a cost for an average of 400,000 Canadian dollars. Statistical analysis is $500,000. Pharmacovigilance is more than 500,000 Canadian dollars. So a clinical trial, a late phase, phase 2, phase 3, much more, comes with a cost. But when we think about that, it's normal. Why? Because we're talking about patients who agree to participate in a trial, who agree to take a medication, who is not on the market. So obviously, they're expecting a benefit, but they're putting their health at risk also. And we have to be sure that this risk is minimized and well controlled during the whole trial. That's why it takes a cost. And another step, data integrity. You want this risk to worth it. This means that you want to collect data of quality. That's why you need all this expertise all along the trials. Thank you for your attention.